Okay, let's talk about Filecoin Plus. First things first, if you ever see Filecoin Plus stylized like this with a capital I and a capital L, that is incorrect. Please do not capitalize the I and the L from now on. Thank you very much. Moving on, let's talk about what the Filecoin Plus program actually means. I want you to leave with an understanding of the core concepts, but also understanding why it actually matters to you in the businesses that you're building, as well as some resources and some next steps for you to go. And I'll also spend some time talking about overall program updates and sort of where we're at, so you get a sense of how you could plug into the system or participate in the program itself. First things first, what is Filecoin Plus? By definition, Filecoin Plus adds a layer of social trust to the Filecoin network to incentivize useful storage. So if you think about Filecoin, the network, right? You've got a bunch of random IDs on the chain that are storing data, and then you have another bunch of random wallet addresses sending deals to those IDs to say, hey, can you store this data for me? But ultimately, it's P2P, it's anonymous, you have no idea what's coming over the wire. And some of that stuff is actually incredibly valuable to society. Some of that stuff, like open data, archival use cases, things from like a value PR standpoint, raise the understanding of Filecoin, raise the leverage that we have in building useful products for society and adding value back into the world from open source technology. And so Filecoin Plus gives us the ability to effectively build a decentralized autonomous mechanism to identify in what cases something of value is actually being added to the network. I know that sounds very confusing, and we're going to talk about how that actually comes together. I'm going to throw a couple of words at you now. Please bear with me. We'll go through and define them, but these are the ones I want you to hear. Number 1, root key holders. Number 2, notaries. Number 3, clients. Number 4, storage providers. You should know at least one of those 4 words at this point. But the mechanism of Filecoin Plus is to effectively interact between these sets of entities through the allocation and spending of this unique resource called data cap. So let's talk about what data cap actually is. Data cap is defined as a novel resource within the Filecoin network. So it's not a currency. It's not the same thing as fill. It's a different value. So an address can have a data cap balance. Data cap is allocated to addresses that can use it to make deals. And as they make deals, that balance is burnt. So you actually run it down to 0. If a deal is made with data cap on chain, that deal is recognized as something called a verified deal. And that's different from a generic deal. So deal will have a property of verified. And if that property is true, what it does is that when the block reward auction mechanism comes around and the lottery comes through, the power that that deal is contributing towards an SP's overall presence on the network is multiplied by 10. And the way that works is actually we have something called a quality adjustment in the network, which multiplies the size of a sector by some number n to give you n times the size of the sector in terms of the presence that you have on the network. And so for Filecoin Plus sectors or for verified deals, your quality adjustment is a factor of 10. Why this is interesting to you is because for the same CapEx and the same OpEx, you're getting 10x the block rewards on chain. So specifically, actually that's a lie because you're going to multiply your collateral, but at least for the same hardware expenditure plus some multiplier on the actual collateral, you end up getting the opportunity to get 10x your expected value of block rewards from the network. So how does that actually work? Let's go back a slide here. I don't know if this is actually visible to you. I think the text might be a little small. Can somebody tell me in the back? Okay, it looks like it's a little small. So we'll just talk through it. But basically, that blue box at the top says community governance. The idea is that we build a community that can make decisions together, shape the program, identify ways in which policies, guidelines need to change to adapt to the market today, and deliver something of value for the overall ecosystem of Filecoin. The yellow box, you can see the colors-ish? Okay, I tried to pick colors that you can differentiate, but I've now realized I need to make them more accessible. The yellow box stands for root key holders. Their job is just to execute decisions made by the governance community. So they're supposed to be unbiased observers of the community that just execute on decisions. There's something called a notary, which is like one of the key stakeholder roles introduced by Filecoin Plus, and I'll define that for you because that's a very specific one for you to understand. And then there's clients and there's storage providers. Clients receive data cap from notaries and spend data cap to make deals with storage providers. Storage providers that make deals with verified clients and therefore receive verified deals get 10x the amount of block rewards on chain for those deals. Does that make sense? Any questions on that particular piece? Okay, I don't know if you guys are just tired of me yet, or it's only been like 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, what's up?
Question. So I know that you get the block rewards through some vesting schedule.
Yes.
Anything with real cost?
Exactly. So effectively, all it's doing is your expected value is being multiplied by 10. That also means your collateral is being multiplied by 10. Otherwise, you'd be a flight risk to the community, right? Because for the same collateral, if you're getting 10x block rewards, you'll take your first 25% and disappear. So that's why I corrected myself in the past where like technically OpEx is not the same. But for the same hardware, you're able to reap a much higher expected value. And the reason that's super important for you guys is because at the current Filecoin price, this is the only way it's actually worth buying hardware today at scale and applying it towards growing the presence of your storage providers. Of course, if the price changes and rebounds and goes up to where it was, say, a year ago, this wouldn't necessarily be true, and you'd have multiple ways of making profit. But where it stands right now, especially like under the threshold of like say $10 to $12, like you guys will all have your math. I know Andrew did a good job caveating that he's not going to answer this for you, but actually he is. If you hound him enough, he'll tell you the exact answer to this question. But there is a break-even point for every single one of you. And right now, where the price is, you need this to break even. And that's why I really want you to understand how this works. Okay, so let's, I'm going up, not down. Sorry. All right, let's define notaries real quick, because this is pretty important. The job of a notary is to distinguish from the global pool of demand coming into Filecoin what is actually worthy of receiving data cap. And specifically, that's getting into the subjective and the nuanced conversations around defining what's useful, or like what is a good use of our resources as a network versus not. And so these are individual humans that have been elected by a rubric that's defined by the community and executed on by the community and audited by the community to effectively run due diligence and KYC processes on incoming demand to the network. So specifically, like for example, John wants to store something on Filecoin. Andrew Stanko is a notary from Picnic. He got elected in the last election cycle. He didn't actually, somebody else's, but let's say he is for the sake of this example. John wants to store his family photos on Filecoin. He now has to convince Andrew or some other notary that it's actually worth it. Maybe John's a celebrity. Maybe he's got a lot of interesting photos that a lot of people want to download. Maybe he doesn't give a crap about privacy and he's open license all his photos anyway. Maybe John is important enough that some of the work that he's doing will earn him like a Nobel at some point. And so it'd be really cool that we had photos of him as a child on the Filecoin network. And so Andrew's sitting there having conversations with John, being like, what exactly are you doing? Who are you? Are you actually who you claim to be? Is the data you're bringing on actually worth it for the Filecoin network? And if the answer is yes, have some data cap. And because the block rewards are so inflated with that data cap, John now comes to storage provider. I don't know, let's pick a really bad storage provider. Me, I would be a really bad storage provider. John would come to me and I'd be like, you probably don't want to work with me, but because you have data cap, I'd love to work with you. And at that point, John's like, I have more leverage in this. So he found somebody reliable like Picnic, like Stu. And Stu would actually say, I've done all the math and I can actually give you this deal for free. And so that's a really interesting mechanism that's introduced by Filecoin Plus, where because there's so much leverage created by data cap, it gives a lot of the power back to the clients and back to the demand side of the network to define what's actually interesting and important. Because now John has the ability to say, hey, Stu is also giving me a free deal, and shitty SP Deep is also giving me a free deal. Why would I do that when I could work with Stu? And I'm going to get the highest quality of service, I'll get redundancy, I'll get replicas, and I'll ensure that like my data is never lost in the network. And so the notaries represent this really important stakeholder role as fiduciaries of the network to deliver value in defining how much utility Filecoin actually provides to society in like a 5, 10, 15-year horizon. Does that make sense? Okay, last time I did this presentation, half the room left being like, I'm going to be a notary. And when the notary elections came through, I had like 3 ESPA participants apply, which was awesome. So I'm seeing you all nod, which obviously means everything I'm telling you makes sense. So now you'd better all be applying in Q4 to participate as notaries in the program. No pressure. Okay, so real quick recap on this. I would ideally have wanted you to tell me this, but because you've just seen lunch and I'm only like 50% mean, I'll tell it to you one more time. Notaries perform due diligence or some sort of KYC on clients to verify them. Effectively, what they're trying to gauge is this a real client or a real source of demand with valid and useful data for the Filecoin network? If that's true, then they give data cap to that client and specifically to an address owned by that client on the network. That address burns data cap or uses data cap as like a one-time use credit to make deals with storage providers. Storage providers that take those deals get a 10x quality adjustment, and thereby by upping their collateral by 10, they also increase their expected value by 10. Cool, makes sense? So let's talk about how you actually get data cap. There's 3 ways in which people typically come and get data cap. 3 levels of KYC or three mechanisms to get there. First is what we call automatic verification. So there's actually a website. You're all on your computers Googling other stuff anyway. So if you are, you can head over to this URL, verify.glyph.io, and you can sign in with GitHub. I see Kyle laughing because he's been caught. Classic. You can sign in and actually get 32 GB of data cap right now for free, assuming you've had a GitHub account that's older than 18 months. Now, there's some of you in this room being like, I don't have a GitHub account. Let me help you. Please make a GitHub account. It's going to help you a ton in this ecosystem. You're entering the world of open source. It's really important for you to have presence on platforms like that because that's how you build reputation. That is a way in which you convince somebody that you're trustworthy. It just so happens that we had a notary apply at some point and make the claim that GitHub accounts of like older than 180 days are useful or like they're people that are not scamming the system. Actually, we should reassess that given that Filecoin's been around for nearly 2 years now. But at some point, we decided, you know what, it's not a fake GitHub account. It wasn't created yesterday. Maybe we should be able to give them data cap. And I expect that in the future, we will continue to build out different ways of providing data cap in an automatic fashion. This just happens to be one of them. Number 2 is what we call manual verification or direct verification. This is where you work one-on-one with a notary. So that example that I gave you of like John working with Andrew to convince that notary that you're a trustworthy source of data. And you typically end up getting data cap in the range of like 10 to 50 terabytes. So this is really good for like a POC, or this is really good for like an edge case or like experimenting with a different kind of demand that you may not be working with at scale yet, or you want to provide some sort of value to an end user data owner who you'll eventually go back and sell Filecoin as a concept to at a much larger scale. And then we have this third pathway that I typically call like Filecoin Plus for large data sets. And the implementation of that is what we call a large dataset notary. A large dataset notary actually is an on-chain presence. It is a multi-sig. A multi-sig stands for an account that has multiple signers. That's where the term multi-sig comes from. And you apply to that account. And so it has a set of notaries that are interested in giving you data cap, but 2 of them have to approve you every time you get data cap. And that enables us to move at a much higher speed. We are able to give tranches of data cap out in like the hundreds of tebibytes for like real enterprise use cases that are looking at hundreds of tebibytes or pebibytes of data being onboarded. This is also a good reminder for me to tell you that data cap is spent on a per deal, per item basis, which means that if you have 1 piece of data, but you're going to store it 5 times, you actually need to get 5 times the size of that piece to ensure that every replica that you have results in a verified deal on chain. Where we stand today, I just grabbed that picture. If I told you how short of a while it's been since I took the picture, I'd be embarrassing you and how soon I prepped this deck, but really that's from this morning. It's pretty up to date. These are a couple of the main KPIs that we track. Some main things for you are there's about 1760 unique client addresses on the chain that have data cap today. The total amount of deals sealed is 130. And when I gave this presentation to ESPA 2, that number was at 55. When I gave that presentation to ESPA 1, that number was in the tens. And so we're practically more than doubling every time an ESPA cohort comes through. So please be paying attention to this and participate in this. It's going to be a really important factor in how you define your business. Any questions on how clients get data cap? Of course, I've only touched the high level stuff. There's complexity to each of these processes. I don't want to get into all that complexity today, but I want you to leave knowing with some confidence that you sort of know how to get there. Because if you understand this stuff, you'll be able to get there. Stefan has a question, but there's somebody else there who I'm going to prioritize. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, is that 129 bits based on the 5x replication?
Yes.
Base?
No. Multiple X replication. And it's really hard for us to track without going to a PCID level. And some people replicate 3, some people replicate 10. And so it could be more or less. And so that's why we track it as like just total on-chain footprint. There's another hand in the left somewhere over there. No hands? I guess I have to reconcile and go to Stefan. What's up?
Easy question. What are your LVNs that you use as an example? Do you have any like that you share with the SPs and you go like, hey, this is a perfect example of how you should apply, and this is a perfect reference to this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for those of you that didn't hear that, Stefan's asking if there's any reference data cap applications that I could point people to as good examples of how to apply for data cap. I definitely have a few of those. The best one I've seen was, it was really, really strong. It was written by the USD Show Foundation in coordination with Picnic, actually, so they have a good one. And then the one that might be slightly better was one that I wrote, and I can definitely point you to that as well as an example of how to apply data cap. So if you're going to go through this process and try to acquire data cap at scale, definitely check out our repos. I have links to that at the end of this deck. Everything we do is in the open. Every single application that comes in for data cap is on GitHub. Every single application is on GitHub. You can mine anything in terms of data of how people are acquiring this thing and figure out what works for you. But I'm also more than happy to point you to good examples. Thank you, Stefan. That was a good question. Okay, let's talk about some resources that you need to know about, either because you might be handholding demand in the future, or because you might be a source of demand yourself, or because you need to know these things because you'll be shepherding that demand. First up is our actual Filecoin Plus registry app. It's at plus.phil.org. The goals for this are basically generic pathway to data cap. It also, on it, has a storage providers table of people that have opted in, and we'll talk about how do you do that, but have opted in to be advertised to people that have data cap to make deals with them. The GitHub repo where people go for direct allocations and tracking of direct allocations is Filecoin Plus client onboarding. We also have a Slack channel, Phil-Plus. We have docs, and then we have governance calls bi-weekly. Andrew shouted out the governance calls in his talk yesterday, if you heard that. We do them every other Tuesday, and we do one in the morning and one in the evening. I believe starting in August, the times are going to be 8 a.m. Pacific and 6 p.m. Pacific. The content is largely the same, but the discussion is very different because the audiences are different. Our intent is to keep the content similar because we want to make sure that the community moves together, even though they might be in different time zones. So you're welcome to come to at least one every 2 weeks. There should also be on the repo somewhere like a one-click easy add to calendar thing that I can also send you if you're interested. But they're all an excellent way to ramp up and figure out and get a pulse of where the community's at and get a sense for where things are moving and what the complexities are and where the challenges lie in ensuring that Filecoin actually ends up being useful. Okay, before we jump into the SB life in Phil Plus, any questions? Guys, I'm asking you this so I get points for interactivity, but if you don't ask me questions, Stefan, you didn't even have a question. Ah, very good. Williamsburg, Gelateria Gentil. Definitely check it out. Good stuff. Okay, let's talk about storage providers and Filecoin Plus. So what is the role of an SP in the Filecoin Plus program? I boil it down to these 3 core tenets. Number 1, you're here to offer storage services to people that have the need for storage services. What that means is you should be thinking about advertising to those people and figuring out how you want to price. Pricing, the way it stands for verified deals on chain today, is effectively 0. But that doesn't mean you can't think about how you'd partner with a client and think about how you bring them on long term. And so there have been various references to this. I'm not going to dig into this too much. But you should think about how this gets priced in then into your business models and the packages that you're building and the investments that you're making in a way that they'll add value for your investors, for yourselves, for your company, for your team. Number 2, uphold the program principles and ensure that other SPs are operating in good faith. This is really important because part of Phil Plus is finding proxies or mechanisms to build trust in a world where we have very little information. In a way, a client is effectively trading away their privacy and anonymity to be given effectively free deals. And similarly, as a result of that, we then get disproportionate knowledge about the people that choose to partner with those clients. And so it's important to come into this realizing that you're joining a community of SPs that actually cares about deal making, not just existing on the network for block mining. And so when you do that, that comes with an inherent responsibility to continue upholding that, but then also setting that standard and ensuring that the people that are there with you continue to operate by that standard. And that means going all the way from redefining what it means to build replicas of data and doing them in the most effective and efficient way possible, to calling out SPs that you think are genuinely not doing the right thing via the community operating principles and good faith guidelines. And then last and certainly not least, is it's also your responsibility to operate as a stable and a sustainable business. You're here, you're taking on deals. Deals means there's somebody on the other side of that contract that needs that data to be stored over a period of time. It then means that you've set yourself up in a way that you're just not going to walk out on them and not be able to uphold your side of the bargain. And so we do a lot of work around reputation tracking and quality of service in the Filecoin network, and specifically within Filecoin Plus more and more. It comes with things like what is the long-term sustainability of this SP? What is the presence on chain? What is the likelihood that the incentive model that exists in Filecoin will work for them? Are they going to be able to serve a retrieval for data in the future? Can a client actually take a dependency on that storage provider? I just want to call out, I've been using the term client quite a lot. I kind of use it as a catch-all for like the demand side of the network, but really a client could be an owner of data, a preparer of data, somebody who's moving that data point to point. Heck, it could even be the SP that's hand-holding that client. So many times SPs themselves are clients in the Filecoin Plus world. Does all of this make sense? Cool. I see some nodding heads. I don't know if they're nodding because they agree or because they're sleeping, but I'm gonna keep going. Storage provider pathways. What do you do as an SP after this presentation? Number one, go to that link. It's a long link. I'm not going to share this deck, write it down right now. I'm kidding. Happily send this link to you. This is a markdown table that lists a bunch of storage provider IDs, where people literally list ID, where they're based, how you get in touch with them, what their features look like, what is like their data center infrastructure look like. And we can then plug that into a system as we continue to build more and more sophisticated mechanisms for market making between clients and storage providers. The default being that the Filecoin Plus app itself renders this table. So clients that register for DataCap through the app can then also be pushed over to this table and get a bunch of information about SPs that they know are willing to make deals with them. Then we talk about a little bit more proactive advertising. GitHub issues. I mentioned that every single application ends up in a GitHub issue. So there's two main repos. There's the client onboarding repo, and then there's Filecoin Plus for large data sets. Every single application that has gotten DataCap will have a label state granted. And if you sort by state granted, you'll actually see literally every address, other than the ones that are probably scamming and deleted their applications, but every single address that has received DataCap, along with, of course, the GitHub ID of the person that applied. Sometimes there's an email, sometimes there's a website that tells you more. And that's how you can go hunt. If you decide that, hey, you're serious about this and you want to partner with different kinds of clients, I'm just giving you the tools to make sure that you're aware and you know how to hunt for these deals. And then there's two Slack channels that I always recommend joining. There's Phil Plus and there's Phil Deal Market. So in addition to just reaching out to clients that have DataCap, there's also the aspect of getting DataCap on behalf of a client. And there's several SPs, especially in North America, that have become experts on this. The process typically looks like getting buy-off from the client that, hey, they're interested in doing this in some sort of provable way, like even an email thread that says, yes, John agreed to work with Stuart to get this data onboarded to the network. There's an email thread that Stuart could show publicly as the SP to prove that, hey, I'm applying for DataCap, but I'm working with John. It's John's data. I swear it's good. Help me prove it's good, and I'll help you store the deals. And then typically, what we do is we recommend that the DataCap itself is distributed across a series of SPs. So at that point, it actually becomes Stuart's responsibility to identify a bunch of other trustworthy storage providers that he can store that data with. And the real thing that we're looking for is like some sort of geo-distribution. We want to look at redundancy. Like Phil Plus, though it doesn't necessarily levy requirements on deals, it implicitly sets the standards for how deals should be made. And one of the guidelines that we're pushing towards is redundancy. Like we want to see people have 5 replicas, but we also want to see those replicas in different data centers, because it doesn't really make sense to double down on the same infrastructure, because if that infrastructure goes down, so do all the replicas. You may as well not have stored multiples of them. So at that point, Stuart is sort of telling John, hey, I got this. I'm taking care of this for you. I'm applying for DataCap. I'm going to find 4 other SPs or 3 other SPs. And then Stuart's like, hey, Stuart's got 1 data center in Vegas, 1 in San Diego. Great, let's set up 2 replicas there. And then let's get at least 3 other replicas set up with completely different storage provider entities. Because at this point, Stuart has a fiduciary duty to John. And if Stuart goes down, John's data can't go down. And so he's got to make sure that that data is stored with other storage providers. And so typically we say no more than 20% to a single storage providing ID, and no more than 2 replicas to a single storage providing entity or organization.
data set of 5.
Yeah.
Called peers. Is there any kind of peering thing that helps you understand certain data sets are down that you have that relationship with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say easily no. There are tools being built by SPs that do this. I'm pretty sure Picnic has an example of this and a couple others that do. And so you'd have to talk to them to get their version of it or at least learn how they're doing it. I have my version of it that I'm building for a different program called Slingshot, which I'll talk to you guys about in about an hour from now. But like from a reference implementation standpoint, no. But there's tools that you can use to easily get to that point. And the way we do that is typically by looking at retrieval sampling. So like pinging to see, hey, is this piece of it, like is this SP actually responding to me? And then can I get a small piece of what I stored with them back? How quickly am I getting it back? And then using that to create a notion of health. But really, like quality of service, health, reputation, these are still pretty early constructs in the network. I care a lot about these constructs. I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about them and building towards them. So if you're interested in that topic, I'd love to chat with you further. Cool. Questions?
Yeah, another question. So let's say you have a customer that wants to only post their data in Bermuda.
Yeah.
They want to get data cap, but there's only 2
SPs in Bermuda. Yeah. It's a really good question. So one of the good things about this community is, like I said, it's not rules, it's guidelines. And because we have humans serving as notaries, not necessarily a piece of software, you have the ability to appeal to the human. Walk them through the nuances, walk them through the subjectivity, see what you can do. We've seen cases where that works. Like we had that issue with Australia, for example. There's like 2 SPs in Australia. Like, how do we deal with that? But there's other cases where it's like, actually, no, then don't go get data cap. Like, we can't prove that these SPs are even reliable enough. Like, why are we taking a bet? Because that then turns into PR risk for Filecoin. Headline, Bermuda news' data disappears from the Filecoin network. Exactly, right? 3 replicas, there was a triangle, they all went away. We don't know what happened, right? Just saying. But it's a bunch of humans, remember that, appeal to that, work with them, affect change in the program, educate the community more, help us learn, help everybody learn. We're trying to build, it's kind of weird, it's a bit of an anti-pattern. We're trying to build a version of not anonymized and somewhat consensus, this human consensus-based decision-making as a sub-part of this network. When I say sub-part, I mean only 96% of all the deals in the network. So it's a small, small portion. But the idea is that this is the way in which we can prove that the network has utility. We can build a strong foundation for deal making. And at least where we are today in like the growth horizon of Filecoin. And you know, when you work on a product that has a 20, 30, 100-year horizon and you're on year 2, you have to understand that we're going to be learning. Yeah. Question from your partner, or no?
No.
Cool. Okay. Oh, question in the back from Chin.
I have a question. So for a client, when they, applying for data cap, sending the application to notaries. So first of all, how many notaries they can send at one time? Second of all, when they get rejections, what they do next?
Good question. So when you're applying for direct allocation to notary, you could apply to any notaries in your region. The region that has the most notaries today, I think, is China. I think there's 18 notaries, so they could theoretically have applied to 18. A lot of those notaries will say, hey, I saw you apply to this other person, so I don't care, and that's totally fine. So you may not get positive responses from all 18 of them, but you're welcome to apply. If you're applying to the large data set notary application for like a large amount of data cap, you apply once and everybody gets it, and so that's more effective. If you get rejected, work with the notary. Find a different notary. It's your burden of proof to identify and prove to somebody that you're trustworthy. It's not their job to ensure that they're helping you prove that you're trustworthy. Yeah, because you're getting free data, free storage as a result of this. So you're theoretically incentivized for it. This thing is blinking at me. I think that means I have half an hour to go. So based on that, let's hop into the last couple of slides. I'm going to speed through these a little bit. Current status of the program, where we're at right now. The main metric we care about, time to data cap. The 95th percentile number for this is just hovering around 2 days. The worst case scenarios look a lot worse than this, and we really want to get this down. We're moving towards more automation. We're moving towards better tool building to support speed and progress of these clients. We're already hovering around 95% of all active deals on chain coming through Filecoin Plus, and about 75% of the data cap given out to client addresses is now being sealed in deals. So we want to keep those numbers moving forward, higher, faster, and reducing how quickly people can get to them. As a result, our main focus areas are time to data cap and then risk, looking at auditing tools, fraud analysis, ensuring that we're building support in the system so that as we continue to move faster and have a larger footprint on chain, we're doing this in a way that's safe. And then last and certainly not least is this sort of notion of like evolving notaries from being guardians from their current role, which is more like a gatekeeper. So going back to Chink's question, somebody rejected me or I'm unable to get through to somebody, the real answer here longer term should be that, hey, you should be able to prove who you are through your presence on chain. Why don't we give you a little bit of data cap to go do that? Earn your trust in addition to like non-Filecoin constructs, but then also via Filecoin constructs to go and establish a bigger footprint. This is a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you. I probably expect you to get 10% of this. I think some of you are getting like 30%, which is incredible, but I'm happy to talk about this stuff anytime. What should you do next? Go join the Filecoin Plus channel and Filecoin Slack. Sign up to participate in our community governance calls. If you don't know how to get to there, find me, or actually even better, find Andrew Stanko. His DMs seem to always be open, and he'll connect you to the community governance calls and get you in. Go take a look at the registry app, send me some feedback for that. That's a heavy work in progress. We're continually evolving that. Participate in the next round of notary elections. We'll probably have one starting in October, and then help us do some audit. We're all like cracking down on cases of abuse, and it's a lot of fun actually to dig into on-chain data to figure out where things are going right and wrong. And I've fashioned myself to be like a low-quality sleuth, and I'd be happy to train any of you in that ability. And last, please make some actual deals. Looking forward to seeing you guys on chain. Thanks so much.
Awesome.